Hi, everybody. Someone give me a thumbs up if you hear me, please. Anybody hear me? Okay, great. I am sitting in the stairwell of an airport. I apologize. Waiting for Dr. Galanti. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm anxious. I need you. I'm sitting in the stairwell, in the very dirty stairwell of an airport because it was the only place I could find quiet.
Okay, but you're there, you
I'm
made it.
there. I went up to somebody. I'm like, I'm a doctor. I'm going on live now. Please find me somewhere quiet. I lied. I'm not a doctor, everybody. Regine is the doctor, Dr. Galanti. I'll
Ah,
wait a minute or
but
two.
when you texted me that you were delayed, I was
No, no,
anxious. I
no,
was
no.
like, okay,
Guys,
okay.
no makeup, no hair. Thank God I didn't feed my shirt on the plane because I don't have a change of clothes.
Ah, so if we were talking about my favorite thing, like how to manage anxiety, this would be a perfect
Okay,
moment.
because my anxiety is like, whoo. We'll wait 2 more minutes. Everybody tell your friends to join in. Send a text message.
Okay, but we're here. We made
We're
it.
here.
We're good.
We made it. We're good. Baruch Hashem. We'll wait another minute and then we will get started. Yes, I made it, Frida. I made it. I'm in a stairwell.
It
I was
doesn't look like a
counting.
stairwell, so
No,
you're
it
good.
does. I'm sitting on a very dirty floor, but it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, we call that exposure in again in my world.
Okay, should we get started? Another minute.
Might as well.
Let's do another 1 more minute. 8:03. I'm clear. You hear me, right? I have good
Yeah.
service. Okay, good. Thank God. Everybody on? Ready? You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. We'll just start it with a little introduction and hopefully more people will join on as we start. I just want to welcome everybody to our SBH Fertility Live. Here at SBH Fertility Division, we are super busy caring for community couples who are dealing with a full range of reproductive and maternal needs. This includes fertility, pregnancy loss, perinatal issues, and two new and very exciting additions, birth trauma and NICU support. Since our groundbreaking event in August of 2019, we've had over 900 couples reach out. And we promise to continue to hold your hand, break down stigmas, and meet the needs of this very growing community. We have a very exciting upcoming event in the city on March 4th. Check SBH Updates and SBH Fertility for the flyer. It's a collaboration between the SAM School and SBH Manhattan Division, featuring a panel of community women who are sharing their journey. We also have support group registration up and running, including a support group that is about tonight's topic, accepting your family size. And be sure to follow SBH Fertility for all the updates. And in case anybody needs, you know how to reach us. Don't ever hesitate to call 718-787-1100, extension 517. We are ready for the phone calls. So tonight's topic, accepting your family size, we always wanted more kids, is something that makes me very nervous because it resonates with me. And for the first time ever, I've always been moderator, but for the first time ever, I'm going to be in the hot seat and I'll be sharing my journey through infertility and how I came to accept my family size of three children. And we have with us tonight, speaking with us, Dr. Galanti. She is a licensed psychologist who specializes in treating anxiety, OCD, and behavior problems in children, teens, and adults. She's the founder of Long Island Behavioral Psychology, which is a therapy practice in Long Island and in Brooklyn. She's a sought after speaker. She's been quoted in places like the New York Times and the Washington Post. And she is also an author of several books, including one that was recently released called Parenting Anxious Children. And it's available wherever books are sold. Dr. Galanti,
Okay.
we are so happy to have you. Did I do good? Do I get the
Yeah, you
infomercial?
did great.
Okay, good.
You got the infomercial. Now we can get to the good stuff.
We're really grateful that you were able to be on with us tonight, especially me. I'm sharing a story with someone like you, and I'm very honored that you are sharing this live with me.
I think you have the hard job, but I'm happy to help you with that. Um, I'll just say a little bit about me. I am an anxiety therapist and I work primarily with kids, but when you work primarily with kids, you often work with their parents as well. So even though I might sound like a weird fit for, let's say, an infertility live, a lot of the population I see or almost all the population I see are parents. So this topic specifically resonates with me, not only because professionally, when I work with parents, I'm working often with parents who specifically are working on accepting things in their children that maybe they didn't expect, whether it be severe anxiety or behavior problems, and those problems keep their children from meeting their full potential. And we'll talk about acceptance later on, but this topic specifically resonated with me because accepting your family size is something that is personal for me. So generally, when I'm a professional, I tend to keep my personal life out of it. So Rachel, you're not the only one who would rather not be in this position. But I think it's important to share that I have three kids, and all three of them are preemies. So my oldest is now 14, but she was 10 weeks early. And I just went into labor, didn't expect it. She spent months in the NICU. And then they never really figured out what makes me go into labor super early. So I've been on bed rest in the hospital with my second pregnancy. My third pregnancy was like I just constantly just went into labor. And so my kids got less and less premature. I have a 30-weeker, a 33-weeker, and a 35-weeker, and they're all healthy, thank God. But each time was a huge emotional journey and not one that I took lightly. Every decision to have another baby was, is this worth it? Is this worth it to accept my family? Like, is this worth the effects that it's going to have on my current family? Can I give up a year of my life professionally, personally? Is everybody's going to be okay and healthy? Because again, thank God my kids are healthy. But when you have preemies, that's not a sure thing. So, I really love the idea of doing an accepting your family size live because I think this topic is broader than infertility.
Yes.
I think that there are many people who make this decision for all different reasons. Um, so yeah, um, so it's an important topic, but I will also mention when we'll get to this later. Also, there are I wouldn't say silver linings, but there are, let's say, benefits of now my kids being bigger, not having another baby. And one of those is I got to write books. So
Wow. You wrote more than one,
um,
right? A few books?
I wrote three books. So one
Wow.
for teens, one for kids, and now one for parents.
That's so
And that
beautiful.
one came out just a few weeks ago.
You have an event coming up on one of them, right? On the last one?
And right, Parenting Anxious Kids. I'm going to be talking about it at Bikor Cholim actually on March 18th.
I saw that
Actually
flyer.
live, like in person.
Okay.
So,
That's so beautiful. Okay, so
um,
I'll get started. Are we ready?
yep,
Okay.
let's do it.
So I'll get started with my fertility journey. Guys, this is very hard for me. Oops, sorry. Um, this is very hard for me, so just bear with me. Um, when I went through infertility, I really had no support, and I felt partly because I chose no support, but this also wasn't around. And I feel like that limits me from talking about it in a public space. Like I still have that, I'm not able to be vulnerable. So, but I was
And
21 years old. Sorry, go.
being vulnerable is scary.
Very, very. I don't know how everybody else does it, but it's time for me to do it because if we break down the stigma, and I'm asking people to break down the stigma, then I have to do it myself. So I was 21 years old and I had just gotten married. And I want to say after 6 months, we decided that it was time for a family. And we tried and we tried, and I never had, my whole life, I want to say, I never had a regular cycle. And I want to say about 8 months in, I went to my OB, and he said, you know, with an irregular cycle and at your age, it's really not very common for it to be taking this long. And he recommended me going to a fertility specialist. And I was like, oh, wow. I didn't know that that kind of doctor even existed because, like, you know, like, I don't know, I was young. I didn't know about it. I didn't know anyone that went through it.
Right.
He recommended me to somebody who I liked very much. And I want to say, in my first evaluation, he asked me about my history. He did some testing, some blood work, and whatever, and he diagnosed me with PCOS. I had every single symptom. I always struggled with my weight. I had like hair growing where it shouldn't grow. Thank God, Baruch Hashem for laser hair removal. And I thought it was normal, so I was plucking it. And he's like, "That's not
Oh,
normal, Rachel." And I had like a cycle that was 35 days, 42 days, 48 days, 51 days, and he diagnosed me with PCOS. And he said, no problem, it's a quick fix. He was going to put me on Gonal F to make me ovulate regularly, which is another symptom of PCOS. He saw that I had like irregular cyst-like eggs, so I really wasn't ovulating properly, and it was supposed to work. And in the interim, he said, let's test your husband. And I laughed and I said, no way, you found the problem. It can't be both of us. Whatever, do it. But let's get started. It was right timing for my cycle to start the medication, and I really didn't want to lose time. So I got the medicine. It was super expensive. I'm like about to like do the shot one night, and I get a phone call. Stop! Don't do anything. The results came in. This is the wrong direction, and we now had to deal with male factor.
oh,
So my husband had an issue, and I had an issue. And the doctor felt with the results of my husband's testing, really the only way to safely have a baby and quickly and effectively and get pregnant was through IVF. So we went straight to that, medicine in the garbage, all the medicine came. I went through the motions, the shots, I went through everything alone. I did not say a word to anybody. And it was fine. I was strong. I thought I was strong, at least in the beginning. And I started IVF. I retrieved a ton of eggs. Thank God, so many of them fertilized. We got so many good embryos. We even got to freeze a lot of embryos, and we transferred an embryo. I did not want twins. I was very scared of having twins. In hindsight, I might have changed that decision.
we don't
Um,
get to do hindsight
I
though.
know,
It doesn't work that way.
I know, but you know, when you're trying to accept your family size, all these things
Mm.
run through your head. Like, what should I have done differently?
Right.
But
Right. That's the
anyway,
emotional piece.
yep.
Right.
But thank God, we implanted an embryo and it worked, and I had a baby. And then
Okay.
I wanted to be on that 2-year plan like everybody else. And I had frozen embryos and I was going for it. And we went back to the doctor and we implanted another embryo and I had another baby. And I was like, wow, this is great. It's not so bad. It always works. I still have frozen embryos. 2 years later, round 3, I went in for another transfer and it didn't work. Okay, I was disappointed. It was fine. I still had frozen eggs. You have to wait a little bit, new cycle, little emotional like downtime, and then we tried again. And I got pregnant. And I'm like, great, this is my 4th IVF, my 3rd pregnancy, not bad. And I was pregnant. And the whole time I was still by the fertility doctor doing all of the testing. They keep you there for about 12 weeks. And he's like, the baby's measuring a little small, but it's still on the right curve. We'll just keep an eye on it. And I really thought nothing of it. My two last babies were on the smaller side anyway, so it was fine. I wasn't worried. And at 12 weeks, he released me to a regular OB. And I went to the OB at 14 weeks, and I was chatting because everyone knows I'm chatty. And I'm talking and talking on the table, and he's probing to try to get the heartbeat. And he said to me, Rachel, you have to be quiet. And I was like so taken aback, like, why do I have to be quiet? Because he's a chatty doctor. So we always chatted. And he goes, I really need you to be quiet. Stop talking. I cannot find a heartbeat. And now he's pushing with the thing. I forgot what it's called, and it's hurting because he's digging. It's like he was digging for a heartbeat. And I got nervous. And at 14 weeks, he said, I'm sorry, but there's no heartbeat. And I honestly, I don't remember anything else from that day. I don't know if it's like a real medical thing. I don't remember who called my husband. I don't remember how I got home. I don't remember anything. I honestly,
I think
it,
that's pretty
okay,
normal for a really
because
hard
it's like
situation.
a very small window of amnesia. And then we were going into, I believe it was July 4th weekend. And he did not, I needed a DNE, which is one step more than a DNC because the baby was already further along. And he did not do one. And he said, you have to find a doctor that does one. And we were already in Jersey for the summer. So I was calling all Jersey doctors. And I finally found someone who was able to do it. I had to go for another appointment. They have to confirm that the baby passed. Like, why? I mean, I know why, but like, why? And he scheduled me in for after the weekend, which was a very long time to have that inside of me. I had it announced only to a very few people, and I had to like untell them that I was not pregnant anymore, that the baby wasn't coming. It was very awful. It was a very
Terrible.
awful
It's
thing to do.
really hard.
And and that was it. I had a D&E, and it was a very traumatizing experience, to say the least. Whatever. It was just hard. It was very hard. Um, anyway, I at that point I needed some emotional downtime, and we also didn't have any more frozen eggs. And at that point, frozen embryos, I'm sorry. And at that point, what we also didn't realize, because I had done so many frozen cycles and my husband didn't have to go in for more testing, because we had so many frozen embryos, we didn't realize that his fertility wasn't just low, but it was declining. So we really didn't, the doctor was not very positive, and he, in a very nice way, tried to prepare me for the idea that that miscarriage might have been my last chance, which was very difficult news to swallow. Um, in the meantime, time like a lot of time goes on between all of these appointments, and needing some own personal time. My husband did a small procedure which didn't work, to try to get something to work with so that we could fertilize some more eggs, and that didn't work. And we just really were like forced into a break. And at one point, my doctor called me and he said that he brings in once a year this urologist from Israel who has a special way of retrieving sperm. And he thought we were going to be the perfect candidates. And we went, and it worked. We got very little, but we got. So we started a whole new
Okay.
round of IVF. At this point, I want to say that my baby was not a baby anymore. A lot of time passed. He was probably 4.5, 5 years old. So I was going through the whole, mommy, when are you going to have a baby, mommy? And everyone asking me like, oh, it's time. The first 2 or 2 years apart. Like, you're supposed to be on a 2-year plan. Nobody knew what I was going through. I went through IVF. At the time we were on bed rest, and I just told everyone I was sick for 3 days. So nobody knew that I had trouble. And then, now we started the third round of IVF, and I got very few eggs. It was very disappointing. I want to say I got 8 eggs, which is not so much. And of the 8 eggs, I think 6 fertilized. Of the 6 that fertilized, 4 like turned into embryos. By day 5, which is the common day that they wait for them to develop before implanting them, by day 5, 2 died. So I had 2 left. And the doctor wanted to send both for genetic testing because a lot was riding on these last 2 eggs. He really only wanted to implant one that was genetically healthy. And of the 2 that he sent for genetic testing, only one was healthy. So now we had 1 egg, and he said to me, "This is it. If this doesn't work, please be grateful for what you have. You have a beautiful family, you have beautiful children." And we went for it. And thank God we had 6 years later, we had our 3rd baby. And anyone watching that knows her, she did whatever she had to do to get into this world. She told all the other embryos and eggs, "Get the hell out of here. I'm coming into this world." Like, I really believe that because that's her personality. And that's my small family. It's a beautiful family. I'm very, very grateful for it. But I always had a number in my head when I got married. First it was 6, but then I'm like, no, I can't do 6. So it changed to 4. And then, I had to learn to be happy at 3. But the hardest trigger for me, we were talking about triggers on Instagram. We were asking a lot of questions and we got a lot of triggers from our followers. But the hardest trigger for me is the space between 2 and 3. I will always feel like a child is supposed to be there. And it's hard because it's there. It's every single day. I feel like there should be a 10 or an 11-year-old in between the 7-year-old and the 13-year-old. And it's something that a lot of people notice, and some people just try to ignore it or don't pay attention to it or whatever. And some people like to point it out.
Right.
And that's hard. So.
And we'll talk about this, but it's never a good idea to point out the years in between someone's kid. I'll just jump right in and say that as an expert. They're like just sharing your story. First of all, thank you for sharing that with everyone. I think that being able to do that is so hard and so valuable for other people because it normalizes so many things. But that idea of that age gap or the age of your kids not being right is such a common trigger, I think, for people. Like, we know 20% of women will have a miscarriage. So that means that it's not only you who is looking at a space where a child should be or that you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I think
And
that's
I
so
feel like
hard.
people, it's because that space is there. When people ask, "Oh, how old are your kids?" It makes it a very hard question. And I know, you and I were talking a little bit before the live. It makes a very normal question very difficult. And I love you if you could share what you told me when you and I spoke privately, because that was very impactful to me and helped me a
Right.
lot.
So I think when we were talking about triggers, we talked about there are some triggers that are triggers for you. That it's more about that figuring out how to move towards acceptance of this is my family and this is my family size. And you can't really expect people to not say how old are your kids, because it's a question that people ask that probably for most people it's not triggering.
Right.
So it's more like, how can you work on yourself when you have that kind of trigger to process those feelings, because they're there and they're normal, and it's okay that you look at that gap and you are sad, but to expect it from others might be a step too far because it wouldn't be on someone's radar. I think I told you this, but I feel the same way sometimes when I get to my kids' due dates, which is weird, but my kids' birthdays are so far from their due dates. So when someone says, "Oh, when's their birthday?" for the first couple of years of my kid's life, for me to be like, "Oh, but they should have been X amount, like they should be this age," is not fair for me to put that on them.
Right. Right.
Right.
So it's funny because birthdays also came up for other people as a trigger. They said that someone had mentioned on Instagram, which I thought was like, wow, that it was very hard for her. Not hard for her, but she was triggered by her children's birthday. because the birthdays always made her want more. Like it always reminded her that she wanted more children,
Right,
which I thought was really powerful. And like, what could we
right.
do
Or
in those moments that we are triggered by things like that?
I think for us, for people who are struggling with this, acceptance is a process that starts with knowing that you're feeling a certain way. Just be able to say, I'm triggered by this. It might not be their fault, but what can I do to manage my own emotions? Because all emotions are okay. I'll put that out there. You can't tell yourself, like, accepting your family size is not the same as being happy with your family size. I'm going to make that distinction. I don't think it was in the title, but I'm going to readjust. It's okay
Right.
to say, I'm not happy with this family size, but I am accepting it. I'll talk a little bit about acceptance for a second. Um, I think the idea of acceptance from a therapy lens is about the reality of what is. Like, if I go outside and it's raining, but I planned on, I don't know, going to the beach with my friends and sitting around all day, acceptance means it is raining, period. When we're in non-acceptance mode, we're saying, wait, but I had plans and I was going to pick up lunch and I had this beautiful day planned and that's what I wanted, right? I wanted the beach day.
Yes.
But I can't change the rain. Like, what am I going to do? I can't, like, do a rain dance, stop the rain, everything's good now. Like, so acceptance is just, this is what it is. And I'm allowed to feel my feelings around there. But when I start wanting what is not reality right now, that's when things get really hard for us emotionally, right?
Right. Right. I
And
love
I'll
that.
also mention
Yes.
it's a process. It's not like oh, okay, well, I accepted it now. I'm good. Like, even if you have accepted your family size, there are going to be things that trigger you.
Yes.
You might look at that age gap and you say, oh my gosh, like, I do. Like, that's sad for me. Like, or I hit my kid's birthday and that's sad for me. I kind of felt that. I have my youngest birthdays coming up and I kind of feel like, oh, she's my baby and she's getting
Yeah.
big.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Um, um,
We
so
also,
there's a lot of
a,
ways
a
that
lot of
that
people
happens.
also spoke about like being triggered on Shabbat, on holidays, sitting around the table. For me, I feel like sometimes one more seat's supposed to be full. I always worry if I'll have like a big family from from my small family. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody, but like I think about like my future way down the line. Will I have a lot of grandchildren? Will I have a big family tree? Because I have three kids, and will that get me to that beautiful place? A lot of people said they were triggered by like public places full of children, parks, things like that. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Right. Again, I'm going to start with that's normal. I feel like that too. Like we talked about when we were prepping that idea of like you're around the Shabbat table and like one of your kids is out. They're on a Shabbaton or something, and
Mm-hmm.
now like it really like then it's small. Like you have this smaller family, and that's rough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay that it's rough. But it is rough because it's not what you imagined. When you imagine things to be one way and then they end up being another way, it's hard and it's allowed to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
And like I would say first of all, for people struggling with this, it is okay for you to take what you need. Like if it's what I mean by that is if public places with a lot of kids triggered you, then maybe don't go to them. It can't be an all the time thing, but it can be I don't have to be there. Why do I have to torture myself? Right?
Right. And how would you say that that fits in like with family stuff? It's definitely harder to say, I'm not coming, mom, for Shabbat, or mother-in-law, I'm not coming for Shabbat. Like, how would you work around that when you're around, you know, people had mentioned being around siblings and in-laws that have more children with them, and you're struggling or done, and that's very triggering for them. It's just hard to walk away.
Right. And I would say putting boundaries is not the same as walking away.
Okay.
It depends on the kind of relationship you want with someone. Like, but you're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to say, this is not for me ever, or this is my relationship with my sister-in-law is something that I really want. So I'm going to push through. But maybe I'm close enough to her to be like, but not today, right?
Okay.
I can't go to this thing now. I can't do Purim. It's too much. But I can do Shabbat at your house.
So
Like,
you're saying like take it moment by moment, and it's okay to sometimes set up boundaries, even with when it's around people you love.
right. But I will also say boundaries hurt. Like, people think, oh, I could set my boundary and nobody has a right to care. Like, I just can't do it. But if you don't show up for a friend's bris, they're allowed to care. You should explain yourself, and they should do the best they can to maybe not care. But like, you can't expect permission to set your own boundaries. Boundaries shouldn't depend on someone else. Boundaries are about like, this is what I need for me.
Okay, I love that. I love that. So I wanted to go back just for a few minutes to um, the concept of stopping to grow your family. I don't know if I'm wording it right, but
Accepting your
stopping
family size.
accepting your family. But so, like for me, for example, um, I stopped mostly because of medical reasons, and I could have pushed more, but we already pushed the boundaries, and that was made very clear to us. We had already pushed the boundaries. My husband would have had to go for a very invasive surgery, which he was um, really didn't. He wanted to if it was something that I really wanted, but at the time I couldn't even pull that trigger to say I wanted it because I felt like I was very done with the whole process. So I want to say like my decision to end my journey of growing my family was partly medical and partly emotional. But there are a lot of factors to making those decisions, and I was hoping you could talk to us a little about that.
Right. I would actually say that what you just described was like layers. It's the obviously for infertility, you're starting with a physical or a medical thing, but then the decision to kind of keep going becomes emotional, but then sometimes you end up with like another medical layer and then another emotional layer, and then possibly I'm not it doesn't sound like this was the case with you, but conflict between spouses is also common. Like one person wants one thing and one person wants another.
That
This
could have
is
happened.
not
That could have happened to us. It didn't. It didn't. We fell onto the same page eventually, but we definitely could have put in a position where I could have said, no, like, just do the surgery. I want to have more children. Um, Deep down, I knew he really didn't want that. And I knew that that was something that weighed very heavy on him, that I might say that. And it definitely swayed my decision, but it definitely it could have became a conflict. Like I could see where spouses could argue or disagree or get in the way of a relationship with these kinds of decisions.
right. But I also think your case is so perfect to talk about this because I think for some people it's a medical decision. And you'd think that that is very clear, but I think your story shows how unclear even the medical
Mm-hmm.
side can be. Like, when do I stop medically versus when do I push? But there are cases when, like, a woman has, let's say, too many C-sections, or the doctor says, hey, if you try to have another baby, it puts your life at risk. And that's a pure medical, how did I decide how many kids do I want to have? The doctor said, you want to keep the family you have, you don't do this again. Like, that's clear. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
fine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most cases are not that clear. Most cases are not. Most cases are, hey, could I do this other procedure? And should I do this other procedure? And can my marriage handle this other procedure? And can my current kids handle this? Like, am I being super obnoxious to my kids to the point because I'm doing all these IVF shots and then I'm having miscarriages, and like the trauma and the emotional pain is just so much that like I don't think I could do this anymore. Like, it's a much harder decision about when to say, okay, this is it. And one piece we didn't talk about is the financial strain. These medication
Yes.
all like
Yes.
cost thousands upon thousands of dollars.
Yes.
This
The
is not a
procedures are
decision that
so
everybody could
expensive.
just, right,
Right, right.
right,
Financial definitely plays into it for a lot of people because every round of IVF, round after round after round, it adds up, and it could come from Like once you start having a family, it's easier when you don't have anybody to support. And then once you have other children and school and things going on, it's you have to think twice. You do. You have to think twice.
Right.
You do.
Like, and this, there's, it's almost like there's a scale, and it's like, yes, I want another child, but these are the things on the other side of the scale. Like my health might be at risk, my husband's health, the emotions, like my marriage, my relationship with my current kids. And you really have to weigh those. It's
A few
not
people even mentioned their own mental health.
right,
That
right.
was, I guess after so much that happens to get the small family that you have, it definitely takes a toll on your mental. I felt like my jar was full by the end. I broke down. I had mentioned earlier that I hadn't told anybody, and by the third time, my third round of not well, it was the fifth round of IVF, but the third baby, I broke down. I told my friend, I'll never forget it. She's probably on right now watching, and I think her mouth was like, she didn't know what to say. And I just said, don't say anything. Just listen to me. Don't say anything. I just need to get it out. And we went, every week I saw her. I told her what was going on. I told her the updates, and it felt so good to get it out. But by the end, my jar was full. My mental health was at its capacity. I felt like I had really done what I could. But something that does eat away at me now is regret. Let's talk about that.
Well, I want to get to that, and we will, but I do want to just highlight the reason why I think these lives are important. Obviously, the medical side, but the being able to talk about these things is so, so, so important, because when families are going through this, or even when families are thinking about, like, how do I accept my small family? This is not something that's unique to you. It's not. It's just not. Like, so being able to talk this through with other people is so, so helpful, to know that you're not in it alone. Um,
I'll give
but to get
I'll
into the
give a plug.
emotions.
Wait, I have to give a plug
Right.
now. We have a
Okay.
wonderful peer-to-peer program, and that's exactly what it's for, what Dr. Galanti was just telling us about, talking to people, because it's not someone that could help you medically. It's not someone that could help you with, you know, your mental health or whatever, but it's just someone that's there to listen, someone who experienced something similar. And that in itself is so, so important, especially when you're going through infertility.
Right. Yeah. Okay, but now we can talk about regret, because I
Okay.
think it's a hard emotion,
Okay.
right?
So I go back um, less often than I used to. So I feel, okay, so I'm going to backtrack a second. I feel like I went to the next stage of my life, and I feel young for it, but we have no babies. And, we could travel without a diaper bag, and we could take our big kids to do fun things. And I could be more spontaneous. I love having big kids. I really do. I feel like my time is so meaningful with my children. And I'm not worried about scheduling and feeding and napping and don't wake up my baby, because if they don't sleep, my whole life is an upheaval. So I definitely got to go to that next step in life, which is beautiful. I do feel young for it. And sometimes I regret my decision. I do. I do. I still, if you want to say I have the itch, I don't know what you want to call it. Sometimes it comes, and I feel badly.
I think that's okay, right? Regret is an emotion. It's trying to tell you that you did something wrong. But emotions aren't always true, meaning they give us information, but they don't automatically direct our behavior, or they shouldn't automatically direct our behavior. Just because I'm angry doesn't mean I should yell. Often when I'm angry, I shouldn't yell, because it means I want to, like strangle my teen, and that's not a good idea. So don't do it, right? But regret's trying to say, hey, you did something wrong here, and it's your job to then use your logical mind that you have to be like, did I really? Like, and like you're saying, this is what regret does. It plays these games of like, okay, like, let me just rewind, and maybe I should have had twins. But you knew with the information you had at the time that you didn't want
I
twins. There was
didn't.
nothing
I didn't.
that anybody could have told you,
But
right?
now, you know what's gonna happen? I'm the type of person, like, I'll go walking on Ocean Parkway and I'll sing in the middle of the street. So now that you're saying, you have to tell yourself, what did you say? What were your exact words? Because I'm gonna say them, and people are gonna hear me saying it in the street. You know that I made this decision, and
I
at the
made
time it
this
was okay.
decision. At the time, it was the right
At
decision,
the time
right?
I'm gonna tell myself that it was,
And
and
and and you're allowed, like, you could throw yourself a pity party for a minute. Give yourself 60 seconds, right? Feel bad. And then you close the book and you say, okay, like, now I'm walking down Ocean Parkway. Like, that's it. Now I'm enjoying my big kids again. Like, you're allowed to have those moments when you're accepting something you don't like. Like, being able to say, well, I'm just happy with the way things are. Like, everything happens for a reason. You could do that if it works for you. But it doesn't work for a lot of people because feelings are
no,
hard.
it doesn't work for. I want to say it doesn't work for most people. And when people do say it, first of all, people say it to me, and
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Same.
Let's talk about people's capital.
Well,
Let's go
yes.
into that. Let's go into
Yeah.
that for a
What
minute.
people say.
Yes, let's go into what people say. When people tell you to be happy with what you have, I am happy with what I have, but you can't take away from my feeling of wanting more, right? Can I
Right.
say that? Can
Right.
you validate
That's
me?
that's exactly, even the way you just said that is exactly how I encourage people to think. I am happy with how with the family I have. That's on one hand, and on the other hand, and I am allowed to be sad that I don't have more kids. Both of those things are equally true.
And could they equally happen at the same time, those two feelings?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And could we go into some other comments, because definitely comments are triggering to people. So
Right.
we
And
get
I think
everything.
that's like the most universal thing of, like, what can I do, right? Like, what can people do about this?
Right.
um I think one thing that people ask all the time is, well, I think that happens a lot of, like, oh, you trying for another kid? Like, did you want more? I have only girls, so I get all the time, like, oh, so when are you gonna have a boy? And I'm
Yes. Somebody
like,
said that. Somebody actually said that in the comment, that she's very triggered when people ask her. She has, I think she said, all girls, and they always ask her when she's going to try for the boy. And, like, guys, you don't know if somebody can't have another baby. Don't ask that question. It's 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 very personal.
yeah.
I know people, it's conversational, and it's like a funny thing, like, oh, when you gonna have the boy or when you gonna have the girl, but everyone, we have to be mindful that, forget that they can't have the boy or the girl because you can't choose. People might not be able to have another baby.
Or someone has gone through this whole painful process that we're talking about of working on accepting the way things were, and they're finally, like, in a good place, and then you turn to them and you say, oh, and you can have a boy, and you want to, like, maybe punch them in the face. Like, they don't
Yes.
mean to be a trigger, but this is different from the triggers we talked about before. The triggers we talked about before are things that people don't realize, that, like, you're triggered by saying the color red, and they said red. Like,
Right. So
okay, there's no way for you to know.
I just want to remind everybody that the trigger from before is something that triggers me, but Dr. Galanti put me in my place. And that was, when people ask me how old my children are. So those, I guess you're saying, those are triggers that are really, it's on me to get past that, right? And
Right.
then there's certain, I just want to, so everyone understands the difference, that there are certain triggers that really people have to stop doing. Is that
Like,
what
stop
you're trying to?
triggering other people. Yeah, or specifically, people's decision to have more kids or not is a private one. And when you say something like, when are you going to have another baby? Or, why are your kids spaced out? Why do you have, like, two and then one? Like, forget about infertility. There are plenty of reasons why people take breaks. Like, it
Yes.
could be financial. It could be your marriage is on the rocks and you didn't tell
Postpartum.
anybody.
Could be postpartum,
Postpartum,
terrible
right?
postpartum. It could
Mental
be,
health.
it could be the child is challenging and you need a break. There's so many
It could be that
reasons.
you have someone else in your family that needed your attention. You have
Yes,
a parent who's sick or something, and you didn't have the bandwidth to think about growing your family when you're dealing with this other struggle. Like, we can sit here and name thousands of reasons, right?
right, right.
um,
Right. So
so
people do that to me often, and I don't appreciate it when they say like, "Oh, there's such a big space between two and three." I'm like, I know, and in my heart, I wish there was a baby there. And every time you point it out to me, like you're reminding me, and it's not your business. Do
yeah,
I like tell you why there's a space there? Do you really want to know while we're standing in the middle of the street and you're asking me something that's not your business?
right, yeah. Yeah, it's like, oh, when are you gonna have another baby? When I recover from the fact that I had the last baby 10 weeks early. Give me a minute.
Right,
Like,
right,
do you want to know
right.
that?
Right,
Like,
right. I
it's
think
not your place.
people that's one of the pressures. Definitely one of the pressures are from people, from friends, family, community. I think that also all falls into one category. And while some of it is pressures that we just see, whether they're there or not, some of it comes from things that people tell us.
Right. Another one that people say is, even how many kids do you have? That, as much as I said, how old is your kids, is like a question that's normal if someone knows if you have kids. Even asking someone, how many kids do you have, for someone who has loss or infertility, like miscarriages, that is a triggering question. And I know it's weird, but helping people just think about other ways to ask. Things like, who lives in your house? Or tell me about your family. Even changing that language so that
Yes.
people, because when you say, how many kids do you have? For someone who's experienced a loss, a pregnancy loss, or even lost a child, like, in their mind, they're like, how do I answer this question? Right?
Right, right. I
So,
like that. Tell me about your family. It's a much nicer way because, asking about people's families and wanting to know how many kids they have, etc. It is normal. It is a normal conversation, but there are more sensitive ways to go about it. And the last feeling that I wanted to talk about with you, um, I'm going to use a very strong word. I'm going to use the word jealousy. I hate to use it. I do. I hate to use that word because I think it's very strong. I think it's an emotion that sometimes we can't control when we see people with bigger families, and it feels ugly. I'm just putting it out there. It's definitely a hard. Um, it's definitely a hard one. So talk to me about it. Make me feel a little bit better about it.
so here's the thing about feelings. I'm gonna say it again. I can't take that away from you. Like, it's something you wanted. Jealousy is saying, I wanted this. You're not going and stealing someone else's kid. Don't do that.
No,
Right?
God forbid. No, no.
It was a joke. I'm not. I know Rachel's not stealing anybody else's kid. But I'm saying, like,
Wait,
that,
I will offer to babysit cute, smushy babies. Always, always, always. That I'll do.
right. But that feeling of like someone else has something that I want, it's information. It's information that goes right into that acceptance piece. Because yes, if I could have, I would have, and that's why I'm jealous. Because you have something that I would have wanted, that I do want, and I can't have that. And that's really difficult, right? Like, and I think we didn't mention this specifically, but I know this came up, that like the idea of accepting your family size, like we both have 3 kids, but there are people with 10 kids who are in the same mental boat of accepting your family size, that the doctor says, hey, you can't have another, and that makes them sad, right? It's not about the number of kids. And that can be a trigger for you to be like, okay, but don't you see, you have so many kids.
Right, of course. That would make me. I don't want to use the word upset, but I would get taken aback if somebody with 10 kids said to me, like, oh, I wish I had 12. I would feel I would feel taken aback by that. Not jealous, but taken aback.
Right.
I would
Because
think that
10 seems
that's
like a lot
I would say that
to
that's
me.
insensitive. Even someone who has 6 and wishes they had 7, or 7 and wishes whatever the number is, when it's higher than your number, I like the goodness in me wants to always validate everyone's feelings around me because of course, especially working with SBH Fertility, that's what we're about. Everyone's feelings are valid, whether you have two or four or six or eight or whatever. But sometimes it gets to you. It
Yeah.
gets to you.
But it's also okay to say, I'm not going to be the one to field this phone call. Like, okay, like I don't have to be a martyr. I don't have to be supporting the woman who has what I want in this journey when I'm in the same boat. It's okay to say like, okay, like I need you to call the other sister or I need you to call a different friend. That's okay,
Right, right. So even you're
right?
saying when you're dealing with friends, it's okay to step back from a not step back from a relationship. That's the wrong word. To in certain moments, say I need to take a step back because
Right,
certain
because this is,
feelings are coming up that are
yeah,
triggering to you, especially when they have something that you always wanted or they didn't have the difficulty of having to make the decision or not make the decision if the decision was made for them to stop growing their family. Um,
right, that they get to choose. They get to
right.
choose like, okay, I had three kids that I didn't want anymore, right? Like that feels very different than
Yes.
somebody in your
Yes.
position. And
How could
jealousy is hard.
when people are talking about like their own families, obviously within our friends and close knit people, it's a little harder to filter. But how can we filter what we say just to be mindful of people that might be going through something that we're not aware of?
I think just even thinking about filtering is the first step. Like I talk a lot about awareness. So before you ask this question, just think, is there other ways that I can say this better? Or am I going to kind of poke at someone's raw nerve? If I know someone has been through infertility, I should really like check my words 6 times before I say them, before I talk about number of kids or, oh, you know, how hard it is when you have a baby crying and then a toddler running around. Like, just think about what you say before you say it and follow their lead. And if you're close enough to someone, ask them what they want.
Oh,
Like, if you know someone's story, like, just ask them, how should we talk about this?
okay. Okay, I like that. I like that asking a friend, like, what are your boundaries if you know they're going through something? I love that. I
Right. Do you
love that.
want me to not talk about my kids? Do you want me to, like, right? For some people, they'll say, yeah, no. And some people are like, no, I want to hear about how annoying your kids are. It makes me feel better
Right.
that I'm not having to deal with that.
Okay. I love that. That's great advice. Thank you. Anything else that you want to add? I see we have one question. I'm going to open it up.
And while you're opening it up, I'll
Okay,
just
so
say that, like,
somebody asked, what if you understand and talk to yourself all the time, but you still can't accept it after so many years?
I would say that's what therapy is for,
Yes.
right? I know I'm a therapist. We want to destigmatize everything. Like, this is hard.
Yes.
Talking to yourself is one thing, but you might not be using the tools that will work for you to figure out how to get to that place.
Yes.
Because I'll give a very random metaphor, but I use this in therapy all the time that like if I walked up to you and I just like cut off your pinky finger, which would be a terrible thing to do and whatever, we could get through that later. You have two options, like assuming they can't get it back on. I know it's very morbid, but bear with me.
You're really getting a little descriptive here.
I know. Well, there's a
It's
point.
okay.
There's
Go
a
ahead.
method.
Go for it. Go
It's
for it.
more
You're laying it
like,
all out. Go for it.
now, how are you going to live your life? Are you going to be the best nine-fingered person that you can? Or are you going to let that pain consume you? And if you let the pain consume you, no one would blame you, right? Like, that's a terrible thing that your therapist did. You shouldn't, like, you could blame me for the rest of your life, and that would be so fair. But it's not good for you and your growth. So it's more like, how do I get to that place where I can recognize that even though this is not what I wanted, not what I would have chosen, I need to be figuring out how to live the best life I can within the parameters that God put me in.
Okay. So I want to just touch on the last thing that you mentioned, therapy. I wanted to say this and I forgot, so thank you for reminding me that I did join one of SBH's support groups. They ran Accepting Your Family Size once before, and it was so funny. It was group therapy. It was a lot of chatting and just like conversations between a few of us who were all feeling the same thing with a therapist who guided the conversation and would ask us like triggering questions and bring us to talk about it and whatever. And at the end, I first of all I made friends with all new people whom I love, and it was so good to see that really people think. We talked about things like jealousy and things like regret and anger, and I felt ashamed for those feelings. I really did. And I was so comforted to see that those feelings are normal and people share them with me. And then at the end of the group, I want to say a few weeks later, we met for lunch and we are like, I feel better. Do you feel better? They're like, I feel better. I'm like, I don't know. I feel better. It hasn't been bothering me so much lately. So, there is what to say about seeking professional help in the forms of group therapy and individual therapies. And that's always something that SBH can help us with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything you just said.
Okay. Thank you so much. I want to thank you. I really want to thank you for joining us and for being on this live with me. And again, sorry guys, I'm sitting on a stairwell in an airport and I made the best of the situation. And I apologize if you saw people walking in and out behind me. I hope that wasn't distracting to you.
You
And
handled this so much better than I would have handled it. I am
I,
so impressed by your
I
flexibility.
was
So good job.
sweating. I was sweating more. Um, but I'm really honored that I got to speak with you. You even made me feel better because, while I did do group therapy, the thoughts still do come up, and um, I felt, I really everything you said resonated with me, and I really appreciate
Oh,
it. I
I'm really,
really appreciate.
really, really glad.
Yes, and guys, please, I really recommend. I'm not saying this as a volunteer. I'm saying this as someone who went through the support group, as someone who needed it. I really recommend accepting your family size support group. It really was probably one of the best decisions I ever made post having to stop growing my family. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so much. I'm gonna buy a copy of your book. I'm so curious to read it. Have a good night,
Yeah.
everybody. Thank you, Dr.
Bye,
Galanti.
everyone. My
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.